When Warren Yeats first saw Camila Orson's application land on his desk, he knew hiring her would mean breaking the one rule he'd established when founding Pinnacle Publishing 7 years ago. Never hire anyone connected to competing publishing houses. But there was something about her portfolio that made him pause, a raw talent that seemed wasted at her current position. Now, here she stood in his office, even more compelling in person than her impressive resume suggested, and Warren found himself forgetting why that rule had ever mattered in the first place. "So, Miss Orson, your experience at Horizon Books is extensive," Warren said, trying to maintain his professional demeanor despite the distracting way she confidently held his gaze. 5 years as a senior acquisitions editor is nothing to sneeze at. "Thank you, Mr. Yeats," Camila replied, her voice steady but warm. "But I think we both know why I'm here. Horizon hasn't published anything groundbreaking in 3 years. They're playing it safe, and I'm not interested in safe anymore." Warren leaned back in his leather chair, studying her. At 36, he'd built Pinnacle from nothing into one of the most respected independent publishers in the country. People called him ruthless, driven, even cold. His no competitors employees policy had served him well, no trade secrets walking in the door, no divided loyalties. Yet here he was, seriously considering breaking his own cardinal rule. "And why should I believe you wouldn't take our strategies back to Horizon after getting what you want here?" he asked, hating how corporate he sounded even as the words left his mouth. Camila didn't flinch. "Because I quit Horizon 3 weeks ago. I could have gone to any of the major houses they all called, but I came here because Pinnacle is doing what I believe in, publishing voices that matter, not just voices that sell." She leaned forward slightly. "Besides, I signed an NDA with Horizon that I've respected completely. I wouldn't expect anything less from myself if I worked here." Warren nodded, impressed despite himself. He glanced down at her portfolio again, the list of authors she'd discovered, the awards they'd won. Then he looked back at her, 32 years old, sharp green eyes, dark hair pulled back in a professional style that nonetheless couldn't hide its natural wave. Something about her reminded him of why he'd started this company in the first place. "I'll be straight with you, Miss Orson. We have a policy against hiring from direct competitors." "I'm aware," she replied. "Your HR director mentioned it when I submitted my application. That's why I included the letter from my former supervisor confirming my departure terms." Warren nodded. "I saw that." "Still, there's a reason for the rule." "Rules exist for good reasons," Camila acknowledged, "but the best leaders know when exceptions prove more valuable than adherence." Her directness caught him off guard, and Warren found himself smiling despite his reservations. "You're not afraid to speak your mind, are you? I figure you didn't build this company by surrounding yourself with yes people," she replied, returning his smile with one of her own. An hour later, Warren was still thinking about her as he stared out his office window at the Manhattan skyline. His assistant, Marcus, knocked and entered with the afternoon reports. "So, did you send Miss Orson packing with the usual "we'll keep your resume on file" speech?" Marcus asked, setting down a stack of manuscripts. Warren turned from the window. "I offered her the position." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "The acquisitions director position, but what about your rule?" "Sometimes rules need to be broken," Warren said, surprising himself with how right the decision felt. "She starts Monday." The first weeks of Camila's employment passed in a blur of productivity. She had an eye for manuscripts that others overlooked, finding commercial potential in stories that spoke to both critics and everyday readers. Warren found himself looking forward to their weekly meetings, extending them from the scheduled 30 minutes to often over an hour as they debated market trends and author potential. "You were right about the Henderson manuscript," Warren admitted during their third week, closing the file on his tablet. "I didn't see it at first, but the way you positioned it makes perfect sense." Camila smiled, and Warren felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. "It's all in how you frame it," she said. The story's always been there, we just had to find the right lens to view it through. Their working relationship quickly became the most stimulating professional connection Warren had experienced in years. But it wasn't until the Frankfurt Book Fair that things began to shift beyond the professional. International book fairs were notorious pressure cookers, days of non-stop meetings, nights of industry parties where the real deals happened. Warren usually sent his international rights team, but with several major deals in negotiation, he decided to attend in person this year. He hadn't expected Camila to volunteer to join the team. "I speak fluent German," she'd explained when he questioned her. "And I have existing relationships with editors at 3 of the European houses you're targeting." So they found themselves in Frankfurt, days filled with back-to-back meetings and evenings spent strategizing over dinner. On the third night, after successfully closing a major translation deal, the team had gone celebrating. As the night wore on, executives peeled off to their hotels until only Warren and Camila remained at a small jazz bar near the river. "I have to admit," Warren said, swirling the last of his whiskey, "I had my doubts about bringing you on. Breaking my own rule didn't come easily." Camila studied him over her wine glass. The dim lighting softened her features, bringing out flecks of gold in her green eyes. "And now I'm wondering why I made such a rigid rule in the first place," he admitted. "Talent is talent, regardless of where it comes from," she smiled. "Is that your way of saying I'm doing a good job?" "You're doing an exceptional job," he corrected. "The Henderson deal alone justified the hire." "High praise from Warren Yeats," she said, a teasing note in her voice that he'd never heard before. "I should record this moment for posterity." Warren laughed, realizing how rarely he did that these days. Running Pinnacle had become all-consuming, leaving little room for anything else. Yet here, thousands of miles from the office, with jazz playing softly and the warm glow of success surrounding them, he felt more like himself than he had in years. "What made you start Pinnacle?" Camila asked suddenly. "I've read the official story. Young editorial prodigy breaks away to champion overlooked voices, but what really drove you to take that risk?" Warren was surprised by the question. Most people were interested in the mechanics of his success, not the motivation behind it. "My father was a writer," he said after a moment. "Not a great one, but a dedicated one. He spent 20 years submitting manuscripts, collecting rejections. When he finally got his novel published, the house buried it. No marketing, minimal distribution. He died believing he wasn't good enough, but the truth was, no one gave his work a real chance." Camila's expression softened. "So you built a company that would?" "I built a company that would recognize what matters and fight for it," he corrected. "Sometimes that's a brilliant manuscript everyone else missed. Sometimes it's a talented editor who happens to have worked for the competition." Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted between them, a moment of recognition that stretched beyond professional admiration. Warren felt a pull toward her that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the woman herself. The moment was broken when the server arrived with their check. As they walked back to the hotel, the cool night air cleared Warren's head, reminding him of boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. Camila was his employee. Whatever this feeling was, acting on it would only complicate things. Back in New York, Warren found himself increasingly aware of Camila's presence. He noticed details he had no business noticing. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when deep in thought, how she always had a pencil tucked into her notepad despite everyone else going fully digital, the slight raspberry scent that lingered after she left a room. Their professional relationship continued to flourish. Pinnacle's newest releases were generating buzz, and acquisitions under Camila's direction were being praised for their commercial appeal and literary merit. But Warren found himself creating reasons for meetings, extending conversations, finding excuses to work late when he knew she was still in the building. "You're playing with fire," Marcus warned him one evening, catching Warren watching Camila through the glass walls of the conference room as she led a team meeting. I don't know what you're talking about, Warren replied automatically. Marcus had been with him since Pinnacle's first year, had seen Warren through the company's growing pains and his own personal failures. You broke your rule to hire her. Don't break the more important one by pursuing her. I'm not pursuing anyone, Warren insisted, turning away from the window. She's a valuable employee, that's all. Marcus raised an eyebrow. If that's all she is, then why have you declined 3 dinner invitations from Sophia Reeves in the past month? Warren had no answer for that. Sophia, a successful literary agent who'd been making her interest in him clear for months, would have been exactly his type a year ago: smart, independent, not connected to Pinnacle. Yet he found himself making excuses, canceling plans. The situation came to a head at Pinnacle's annual holiday party. The company had taken over the top floor of an upscale hotel, celebrating their most successful year to date. Warren had given his usual speech thanking the team, highlighting the year's accomplishments. He'd managed to keep his eyes from lingering too long on Camila, who wore a deep blue dress that made her eyes look impossibly greener. Later, as the party wound down, Warren found himself on the terrace overlooking the city. December air bit through his suit jacket, but he welcomed the cold, hoping it would clear his head. Hiding from your own party, Camilla's voice came from behind him. Warren turned to find her stepping onto the terrace, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the chill. Taking a moment, he corrected, smiling despite himself. It's been a long year. A successful one, she added, coming to stand beside him at the railing. You should be proud. We all should be, he replied. Your acquisitions have been a big part of that success. She glanced at him, snowflakes beginning to dust her dark hair. Is that why you've been avoiding me for the past month? The directness of her question caught him off guard. I haven't been, Warren, she interrupted gently. You used to stop by my office almost daily. Now you send emails instead. Our meetings have become strictly agenda-driven, and you always have someone else in the room. If I've done something wrong, I'd prefer to know what it is. Warren sighed, his breath clouding in the cold air. You haven't done anything wrong, it's me. I'm trying to maintain appropriate boundaries. Boundaries, she repeated, studying his face. Between CEO and employee. Yes, he said, though the word felt hollow. Camila was silent for a moment, snowflakes gathering on her eyelashes. And if I wasn't your employee? The question hung between them, dangerous and tempting. But you are, he finally said. I've been offered the editorial director position at Bellwether Books, she said quietly. Warren felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Bellwether was larger than Pinnacle, with deeper pockets and international reach. It would be a significant step up for her career. When, was all he could manage, last week. I have until the end of the month to decide. Are you going to take it? He asked, hating how much he dreaded her answer. Camila turned to face him fully. That depends. On what? On whether there's a reason for me to stay. The implication was clear. Warren felt the careful walls he'd built beginning to crumble. Camila, I can't be the reason you turned down an opportunity like that, and I can't ask you to stay for personal reasons when I'm still your boss. Then stop being my boss, she said simply. Warren blinked, confused. What? Pinnacle has grown. You have division heads, department directors. You don't need to directly supervise acquisitions anymore. Her eyes held his, unflinching. Restructure. Let me report to Elizabeth instead of you. The solution was so obvious, so simple, Warren couldn't believe he hadn't considered it. As CEO, he could reorganize reporting structures. Elizabeth Chen, his coup, was more than capable of overseeing acquisitions. It wouldn't change the fact that I own the company, he said, though he could feel his resolve weakening. No, she agreed, but it would change the direct reporting relationship. The rest. Well, that would be between two adults who happen to work for the same organization, just like dozens of other couples in corporate America. Couples. The word hung in the air between them. Is that what we would be? He asked, his voice lower than he intended. Camila stepped closer, close enough that he could see the snowflakes melting on her skin. I think we both know there's something here worth exploring, but if you don't feel the same way, Warren didn't let her finish. Months of restraint dissolved as he closed the distance between them, his hand coming up to cup her face as he kissed her. She tasted like champagne and possibility, and when she leaned into him, her hands gripping the lapels of his jacket, every rule he'd ever made seemed trivial in comparison to this moment. When they finally broke apart, breathless despite the cold, Warren rested his forehead against hers. "I'll talk to Elizabeth tomorrow," Camila smiled. "I haven't turned down Bellwether yet." "Don't," he said seriously. "If this is what you want, I would never stand in your way." She reached up, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "What I want is to keep building something meaningful at Pinnacle, and to see where this goes." Her eyes met his. "The Bellwether offer just forced me to admit what I've been feeling for months." Warren pulled her closer, the New York skyline glittering around them as snow continued to fall. "I've never been good at breaking my own rules," he confessed, "but I'm beginning to think some rules exist just to show us what matters more." The restructuring announcement went out the following week. Camila would now report to Elizabeth Chen, with Warren focusing on strategic growth and new markets. If anyone suspected the real reason behind the organizational change, they kept it to themselves. Marcus, of course, saw right through it, but his only comment was a knowing about time when Warren confirmed he and Camila had begun seeing each other. Their first official date was nothing like the business dinners they'd shared before. Warren took her to a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, far from the publishing world's usual haunts. Without manuscripts or market reports between them, they discovered new sides of each other: Camila's passion for classical piano, Warren's secret hobby of restoring vintage motorcycles, their shared love of obscure documentaries. "I can't believe we spent months talking every day and never knew these things about each other," Camila said as they walked through Washington Square Park after dinner, her hand warm in his despite the January chill. "We were focused on work," Warren replied, though it felt like a weak explanation. "And I was focused on not noticing how much I wanted to know everything about you." She laughed, the sound bright in the winter air. "Was I that obvious?" "No," he assured her, pulling her closer as they walked. "I just couldn't stop thinking about you, even when I tried." As winter melted into spring, their relationship deepened beyond what Warren had experienced before. They were intellectual equals, challenging each other's perspectives on books, art, and business. Camila's insight into authors' needs complemented Warren's market instincts. Even as they kept their professional interactions appropriate, their personal connections strengthened. By summer, Warren realized he'd never felt this way about anyone. The thought of Camila not being in his life seemed impossible, like contemplating a world without sunlight. One warm July evening, as they sat on the rooftop garden of his Tribeca apartment, he finally put words to what he'd known for months. "I love you," he said simply, watching her face in the glow of the string lights he'd hung earlier that day. Camila's smile was radiant. "I love you too. I think I have since Frankfurt." "That long?" he asked, surprised. "That's when I saw the real you, not just the CEO, but the man who built Pinnacle because he believed in something." She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. The man who cared enough about his father's memory to create something that would have honored him. Warren felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with anxiety and everything to do with how perfectly she saw him. "You know, when your application first came across my desk, I almost rejected it outright. No competitors' employees, it was my one unbendable rule." "What made you bend it?" she asked, looking up at him. "Something in your cover letter," he admitted. "You wrote about believing that the right story at the right time could change a reader's life. It reminded me of why I started this company in the first place." He kissed her forehead. "Best rule I ever broke." The publishing industry took notice of their relationship eventually, but by then, Camila's success at Pinnacle stood on its own merit. Her acquisitions consistently performed above projections, and authors sought her out specifically. Warren had restructured the company again, promoting her to executive editorial director, reporting directly to the board rather than any single executive. Their one-year anniversary arrived on a crisp autumn evening. Warren had arranged for a private dinner at the same jazz bar they'd visited in Frankfurt, flown in specially for the occasion. "You recreated our first real conversation," Camila said, looking around the transformed rooftop of his building in wonder. The same jazz quartet from Frankfurt played softly in the corner, and the tables had been arranged to mirror the German bar's layout. "I wanted to bring us back to where it began," Warren explained, leading her to the table. "Before rules and complications, when it was just us talking about what really mattered." Dinner was perfect, the same dishes they'd enjoyed that night, the same wine, but Camila sensed something different about Warren. He seemed nervous, checking his pocket repeatedly, starting sentences and then changing direction. Finally, as dessert arrived, he took her hand across the table. "I've been thinking a lot about rules lately," he began. Camila raised an eyebrow. "Planning to institute some new corporate policy I should know about," he laughed, relaxing slightly. "No, nothing like that. I'm thinking about the rules I made for myself after my last relationship failed, rules about keeping my personal and professional lives completely separate. About not risking my heart again. And how do you feel about those rules now?" she asked softly. "I think they were there to protect me from exactly what I needed most," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "You showed me that some risks are worth taking. That sometimes what seems like a rule violation is actually the beginning of something better than I could have imagined." Warren stood, moving to her side of the table, and before Camila realized what was happening, he was on one knee beside her. "Camila Orson, breaking my rule to hire you was the best decision I ever made. Loving you has been the easiest thing I've ever done." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a vintage emerald ring that caught the light like her eyes. "Will you marry me and keep proving that some rules exist just to be broken?" Tears sprang to Camila's eyes as she nodded, words momentarily beyond her. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes to all of it." As Warren slipped the ring onto her finger, the musicians played softly in the background, and the New York skyline glittered around them. He pulled her to her feet and into his arms, kissing her with a promise of the lifetime they would build together. 2 years later, Pinnacle Publishing had expanded to include new imprints focused on diverse voices and translated works. Camila had built an editorial team that industry insiders called the most innovative in the business. Warren had stepped back from day-to-day operations to focus on their newest venture, a foundation supporting literacy programs and aspiring writers from underrepresented backgrounds. And on a warm spring morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows of their Brooklyn brownstone, their family grew by one more rule breaker, a tiny daughter with her mother's green eyes and her father's determined expression. As Warren held his newborn daughter, with Camila watching them both with tired eyes and a radiant smile, he marveled at how one decision to bend a rule had cascaded into this life he'd never dared to imagine. "What do you think of Emma?" Camila asked softly, reaching out to touch their daughter's tiny hand. "Emma Yeats," Warren tested the name, feeling his heart expand impossibly further. "It's perfect." As if in agreement, the baby wrapped her fingers around his pinky, holding on with surprising strength. Warren smiled down at his daughter, then at his wife. "You know, I've been thinking about rewriting the employee handbook." Camila laughed, the sound both familiar and miraculous. "Planning to formally revoke your no competitors rule." "Actually, I was thinking of adding a new one," he said, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed so they could be close, the three of them together. "Something about recognizing when the most important opportunities come disguised as rule violations." Camila hummed, leaning against his shoulder to gaze at their daughter. "Maybe just simplify it to some rules matter less than people." Warren pressed a kiss to her temple, then to Emma's forehead. I think you've just written our new corporate mission statement." In the quiet of that perfect morning, Warren Yeats, who had built his success on structure, boundaries, and unwavering principles, embraced the beautiful chaos of a life guided not by rigid rules but by love. And he wouldn't have it any other way.